Hello everyone. Well, today I decided I'm gonna do something interesting. This is related to the upcoming 25th anniversary of Windows XP. Now, I'm kind of doing this spontaneously. I came home on a Friday evening. I didn't really have much to do. So I thought, this would be interesting. And one of the things I've been collecting over the years are these things called Microsoft licensing fulfillment kits. Now, I don't know if you know anything about how Microsoft used to distribute its software in large businesses. So the company used to charge a company, a certain amount of money for, its products when you bought it in bulk, and it was called volume licensing. And back in August of 2001, Microsoft introduced product activation. Actually, they introduced it in beta 2 when Windows XP was in development. And this was going to be a new way to protect their intellectual property. So you can just buy a copy of Windows XP and just, share it with your entire neighborhood. You had to buy a license for each computer you wanted to install it on. Of course, for a large business with say 10,000 PCs, that was just not going to happen. Even 200 computers, it was just unrealistic that you were going to have to activate all 250 computers. Although it could technically work, if all those PCs were internet connected, but this is 2001. We're talking about, the bandwidth requirements for product activation to be checking in with Microsoft servers and the potential that something could go wrong and all that stuff. So Microsoft made an exception for businesses where they could purchase Windows XP and install it like they did with previous versions that did not require product activation. And this was actually a very special version of Windows XP that was released in that time frame. And I'm going to show you a picture, or just show you the disk itself. If I could get it out of the package here. Now, this is what was a very, very important piece of media that large companies acquired from Microsoft to install Windows XP on hundreds or even thousands upon thousands of computers in their organization. Now, back in August, when Microsoft started distributing Windows XP to businesses, apparently one of those businesses, someone within the company leaked this. Or what they did was they took a copy from their volume license fulfillment media kit, made a copy of it with that famous FCKG product key, and of course, the rest is history. It leaked all across the internet, and of course it showed up on the Weir's websites, and it was on Napster, it was everywhere. But this is the origin of that media. This is where that FCKG, or otherwise parochially known as the Devil's Own, got leaked on the internet. And even I installed it. I couldn't afford Windows XP at the time. It was just simply too expensive, and in fact we had just upgraded to Windows 2000 like a year before Windows XP came to market, and my dad was like, no, we're not getting this. what we have is enough. I've already spent enough money on software and we're not upgrading. So of course, you know, I was living in a different country at the time, and you know, we obviously got access to that copy of Windows XP. But eventually Microsoft found out about the lead copy, and they did issue Windows updates that made that copy of Windows XP inoperable, meaning you had to activate it or you got a notification saying it's not legal. Now, of course, there would be future volume license versions of Windows XP that ended up getting leaked to the internet, and people would eventually, you know, upgrade or, you know, inject new volume license keys to keep their Windows XP leaked copy running. Now, I wanted to just take a stroll down memory lane and install this version of Windows XP and just go through that experience of what it was like when you know, injected that or input that FCKG key and you didn't have to activate it. Windows XP just worked. So we're going to take a look at doing that today. I've already pre-set up a period correct virtual machine on a computer running Windows 2000 Professional, because I wanted to get something that would not have issues, because current virtual machines like VirtualBox will have issues installing the OG Windows XP license. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to and the great thing about this too, it's like accessing disk drives, it's much easier on older versions. So we're going to go through the actual install process, and I'm going to go through that scene where you insert that FCKG key. Of course, I'm not going to be connecting this to the internet at all, because you know, there are still vulnerabilities out there. The minute you put Windows XP on the internet, it makes it very, very vulnerable. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to go through the install process and just get to the desktop and see what it was like back in 2001 when you first install this version of Windows. So yeah, let's get into it. Just to give you a little overview, this is just the Windows XP setup actually running in Windows 2000 in the host operating system. And you know, some of the interesting things about, you know, the installer, back in 2001, the original RTM release, which is what we have here, did not even include the .NET framework. Now that's Microsoft's application programming technology that was used to create these new more web-based connected applications, but that was not a part of the original Windows XP release, as you can see here. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to look back at that. So just a overview of what Windows XP looked like when you inserted the disk. You know, it's kind of interesting. I felt like, you know, the user experience, like seeing something like this really clean, beautiful, warm, cozy interface, like I don't even get that in Windows 11 anymore. Like I don't even know what the setup experience when you run Windows 11 from within the host operating system anymore, what the setup looks like. I think it's just a tiny little run installer and a basic wizard that guides you through the steps. But yeah, this just looked really different, and it still kind of looks modern, you know, even though it has that kind of, like, as they called it, Toys R Us look back in 2001. But yeah, this was what, you know, you were experiencing, no pun intended, back in 2001. You would click on install and it would go through the install process. But what we're going to be doing today is an actual clean install of Windows XP in the virtual machine. So give me a sec while we get into that process. All right, so we're now starting the setup process here. As you can see, I'm gonna try to make this a little bigger. There we go. We're now in the setup screen, and yeah, these are things that, you know, we don't remember today, that Windows XP was originally a text-based setup when you did a clean install. Now Windows today is basically, new versions are an update. You just download them through Windows Update and you have the latest version of Windows, which is pretty much what was Microsoft's philosophy when they introduced Windows Update in Windows 98. It was the best way to have the most current version of Windows. But Microsoft didn't start issuing new versions of Windows until through Windows Update until Windows 8. And yeah, this is how you started your installation of Windows XP back in 2001. And it was, you know, a bit of a process. It still is, but you, on a period correct machine from 2001, you would be staring at this screen, you know, on a pretty slow computer in that year when you were installing this. Because I remember what the process was like back then. The average install time could easily go into hours, could go into even a day or more. The basic system requirements for Windows XP back in 2001, if I remember correctly, was 64 megabytes of RAM and a 233 megahertz processor. And I don't know what the graphics requirements were, but you know, Windows XP didn't really require much in terms of graphics performance. But I remember our family computer back in 2001 was this was a hand-me-down computer we got from Food for the Poor. My mom got it for like $20, and it was not compatible with Windows XP. I think, yeah, based on the processor it had a 133 megahertz Pentium and 32 megabytes of RAM. It couldn't even run Windows Millennium Edition, Windows ME at the time. So the only computer I was able to install Windows XP on when I eventually got a bootleg copy was my dad's computer at his office. So it was kind of like you felt left out, because I remember my schoolmates in community college talking about the state-of-the-art computers they were getting at the time with, you know, 32 gigabyte hard disk and all that stuff. We'll get into that a little bit more, but here we are at the main setup screen for Windows XP. Now, to start the installation, what we would do is just press enter on our keyboard. Hopefully that works. I think I probably need to click in the VM to activate it. So we're going to press enter, and Windows XP is going to require that we read the end user license agreement, also known as the EULA, and we did that. And here we have, you know, what would be a typical hard disk size, which is about 4 gigabytes, and it's unpartitioned. So what we could do, we could go ahead and create a partition here. And yeah, we're gonna go with just the default options here. We're not gonna change anything. We're gonna make this as simple as possible. So we're gonna hit enter, and there's an unreserved space of 8 megabytes, and then we're gonna choose our C partition, which is 4 gigabytes, and that's where we're gonna install it. And we're going to choose the option to format this partition using the NTFS file system. And NTFS has been around since the inception of Windows NT, and it's still being used in Windows 11 today. Um, Microsoft did introduce a different type of file system called the resilient file system in Windows 8, which was used for large pools of disk. So it made redundancy a key feature for large backups and stuff like that. So we're just going to go with NTFS, of course, but you did have the option of installing Windows XP on a fat hard disk also, and that was if your hard disk was like 32 gigabytes or less in size. And I probably could go with that because it would be faster, but I still want some of the benefits of NTFS, which is the permissions, the journaling file system, access control list, all those security benefits. So we're going to go with NTFS for now. And of course, Windows XP is going to go through that formatting process to get the disk ready to copy the system files over. And that looks like it's going pretty fast, and we're getting through the install process there, the beginning of it, I should say. But yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier about Windows XP in 2001 was quite a big deal, even though fundamentally it was not that different from Windows 2000. But I was able to install Windows 2000 Professional on that same Zenith GT computer that we got from Food for the Poor back in 2001. And the interesting thing is that it worked relatively well. It was just super groggy. I could probably run just a couple programs at a time, maybe like play some music and maybe just have Microsoft Word open, or maybe play solitaire. But that was pretty much just about it, because it was like Windows 2000 was just really, really slow and groggy on that system. But I ran it for years, and it worked fine. But of course, I wanted Windows XP. That was what I was really, really interested in, because it was the operating system of the day. But there were also, the discussions about macOS 10, which looked really awesome. Like, I was like, wow, that is a beautiful operating system with the aqua wallpaper, the photorealistic icons. But Windows XP also had its thing going too, with the pretty blue Luna interface, and that Bliss wallpaper. It really was attractive in terms of being a major departure from what you see me installing it in right now, which is the classic Windows Classic interface. So this was really a major improvement in the user experience, even though it was pretty much just a glorified skin in some ways, because you could pretty much make Windows XP look like Windows 2000. So this was just a really nice upgrade that made computing for the masses a little bit easier, a little bit more fun to use, and all that stuff. And as you can see here, Windows XP is going through its process. Like, it's amazing when you think about how an operating system was created and packaged together, and to go through this process, to have it distributed, to have someone go into a store and take money out of their wallet or pay with their credit card, buy that operating system, actually to get out of your house and drive to the computer store, because that's likely where most people would buy it. Of course, you had Amazon back then, and when I did finally get a legal copy of Windows XP, I actually saved my lunch money, and I had my history teacher who would travel to the United States back in 2002. I gave her the money to buy me a copy of Windows XP upgrade, professional upgrade. So I eventually did pay Microsoft for their product. I did not just steal it for 2 years. Um, and yeah, it was an event. You know, you bought this product and you opened up the box and you read the manual and you look at the pretty hologram disc. It was definitely something, and it really changed the industry in a way where computing was just not for the geeks anymore. It was a mainstream thing. And I think Windows XP was really the first true operating system that made the internet be so widespread and accessible to so many people. Of course, Windows 95 brought people onto the internet, but in terms of being that first viral mass um, technology that brought the internet to the masses, it was Windows XP. You know, that was the first time for a lot of people to experience the internet. Although I started using the internet as far back as around 1998 with Windows 98, and it was just such a different experience um, using Windows XP in terms of, you know, just being this operating system that was the plug and play experience, attaching peripherals like printers, and you know, Windows XP actually doing a good job with hardware detection with the class drivers that were built in to install your hardware for you and get it configured. Of course, if you wanted, you know, deeper functionality, you would get that by installing the full driver set from the manufacturer's disk. But Windows XP did a lot to make computing a little bit easy, and it really held on to the market for some time because of that. It was like the first version of Windows that became, okay, this is good enough. We don't really need anything else after this. And of course, we all know Microsoft would go on to pursue a project called Longhorn that eventually became Windows Vista. And of course, I'm going to be doing an episode of that next. But you know, I wanted to start off this one with Windows XP, especially with the anniversary coming up in a couple days, and just look back at where we're coming from, and just, you know, just admire that we do have it good right now. You know, even though there are complaints about, you know, Windows 11 with all the AI that's stuffed into it, today it's a very, very polished operating system in certain respects. Just the out-of-box experience for most users. 'Cause most people don't buy Windows anymore. They get it preloaded on a new computer, and like I said, you download new versions because Windows 11 is practically free. You get new versions. I've not bought a new version of Windows since maybe Windows 10 back in 2015. I've pretty much got new versions of Windows 11 based on that Windows 10 key that my computer originally came with. So back then you had to actually take out that $89, which is what the Windows XP Home upgrade cost, or you know, $200 if you wanted Windows XP Pro. So today we kind of have it good. We have free Windows, although that comes with some trade-offs. You're trading your privacy, you're trading it for a lot of telemetry that Microsoft uses to, you know, fund the development of the product. But at the same time, Microsoft still has its large volume licensed products. At work, for instance, Windows 11, the edition that I use is Windows 11 Enterprise, and that's a subscription in itself. You know, if the subscription is lapsed, it downgrades to Windows 11 Pro. So let's pause on that a little bit. Windows XP is gonna now restart, and it's gonna go into that second phase of setup where it's gonna go into a more graphical interface, and we're gonna let me see if I can make this a little smaller. Yeah, and this is my original copy of Windows XP that I actually bought with my own money back in 2001. Yeah, as you can see, the box is still in pretty good condition. I've really managed to keep this intact. And this was also the RTM release of Windows XP at the time, because Microsoft did release a more updated version of Windows XP in 2001 that was actually a significant version with Service Pack 2 that included like a firewall and all that stuff. And as you can see here, this qualified upgrading from Windows 98, 98 SE, Millennium Edition, NT Workstation, or Windows 2000 Professional. If you had a computer with Windows 95, this would not that would not work as a qualifying product. But yeah, this was basically what Windows XP came in. And inside there was a full, and you know, if there's even retail product packaging anymore, I don't want to show my product key, but here we are. Yep, this is what inside looked like. So beautiful. When I saw this, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Look at all the cool stuff. And yeah, it came with a nice manual, and you just really just looked forward to that. Look at even the illustration of what, you know, typical PC would have looked like back then and all that stuff. This was really well done. And of course, you know, this is also what proved you had the real deal, the actual hologram disc for Windows XP. And this was like super cool back then. As you can see, just having this was like, yeah, you were privileged to own a copy. Of course, this is the upgrade. If you had the full version, you really had money. So this was really cool to have back then. But yeah, it's just amazing. You know, this is all a digital process now. You don't have this tangible aspect of, you know, Windows anymore. You still do. There is a retail copy of it, but it's not a big deal to own that because you can just easily purchase it from the internet. You know, you can just download the ISO, or you can make a bootable copy using the Upgrade Assistant. But yeah, this is Windows XP. This is the real deal. This is the version that most people would buy because they would already have an existing computer running a qualifying version of Windows. So, you know, unless you were building a computer from scratch and you just wanted to brag that you have the full version. And, you know, there were also the concerns about hardware modifications and how that would affect the product activation experience on Windows XP. But yeah, this is what you bought in 2001, and it was a big deal for me to be able to afford to buy this. And Microsoft was also upselling you at the same time. So, you know, if you wanted to make your Windows XP experience really truly complete, you would also purchase a copy of Office XP, which I also did. I have that too, and we can take a look at that in a future installment here. So just wanted to give you an overview there. So as you can see, the install process is still going through its thing here, and we're just my apologies. So what we're doing here, I actually redid the installation this time in Virtual PC because I realized that version of VirtualBox or VMware Workstation was not really fully compatible as a guest operating system, as previously it rebooted, but it was showing Windows XP in a very the setup program in a low resolution screen. So I redid the installation this time in virtual PC, and after that reboot, as you can see here, Windows XP is now booted into a high resolution setup screen where it's, you know, showing this new theme and look and feel of the operating system, basically a preview of what to expect when the operating system was completed in its installation. I do apologize, I just woke up this morning, so I'm actually doing this over. And again, I was reviewing parts of the video, and you're gonna hear a lot of ahs because this is like the first time I'm doing a video where I'm speaking on camera. But here we are, we're completing the installation. This part is gonna take a little while, and once it's completed, I'm gonna go through the section where we insert that FCKGW key, also known as the devil's own key. So I'm just gonna pause here while this finishes up. All right, so now we are at the setup screen where we choose our language and we can enter our product key. So I'm just gonna enter the virtual machine here, and we're gonna skip this part. Okay, so I'm just gonna make up a fake name, and we're now gonna enter that famous key. Okay, GW. I should know this by heart by now, but for some reason I don't. So here we go. Going through. I can't remember. Date and time looks good. We're setting up our networking here, and back in 2001, you know, the install process was a little bit more involved. You had to choose like your work group and domain. Work group option lets you network multiple PCs in your home so you can share files and resources, or even if you didn't have a domain controller in your workplace setup, you could do basic networking between say 10 computers. But if you had a larger network, you would have a domain controller and you would enter the name of the domain and sign on at this portion of setup. All right, so Windows XP just restarted, and we're now going into the out-of-box experience phase where we're gonna set up a user account and log into Windows XP for the first time. During the Service Pack 2 distribution, Microsoft removed the edition shown on the splash screen, such as showed Windows XP. So that's something that a lot of people didn't know, that Microsoft used to like to differentiate the editions of Windows that were displayed when you started up your computer. So this part of setup is going to test the visuals, and hopefully it works this time. And I'm going to say yes to that. Maybe need to make this a little smaller so we can see more information on screen. Just need to figure out how to release my mouse pointer. A little bigger on screen here so we can see more information. So this part of setup was something Windows XP always did, where it had to check if you had the right resolution, it's testing for sound and all those capabilities of your PC. And it could take a little while here. Alright, looks like it's doing something. And here we are. This is the part I wasn't able to get in the VMware system. And you can hear that little sound, and we should be hearing the music. Let's see if I can get the audio going. Hearing that cool music reminds me of the kind of a Enigma sound. So let's start setting up Windows XP, and this is what you call the out-of-box experience. I'm gonna skip that. Don't have a modem. Not gonna register at this time. We're gonna set up our user account. I'm gonna call this one John. And there it is. We're gonna hear that amazing boot up sound. Look at that. Seeing this back in 2001 was cool, and I remember seeing this and listen to that, seeing this in a library and just amazed that, wow, this is so different. This is not your parents' version of Windows. This was a new era of Windows. Just the warmth, the colors, the blues. I think this is still a very good looking version of Windows 26 years later. You know, it still pops, and seeing that gorgeous Bliss wallpaper, the plastic looking blue Luna theme. Yep, and here we are. We are now at the Windows XP desktop. And as you can see, I'm not being prompted to activate the product. It just works. And I could start using it to, do whatever I wanted to do. So there we go. And this is how you could tell by the ID that you are running a volume license version of Windows. The retail versions did not have this particular 3-digit, but no one cared about that stuff. The fact is, you got Windows XP for free and it works. And many people have used Windows XP before. They know what it's like. Microsoft stopped supporting it in April of 2014. That's how long the operating system survived. It survived for more than a decade because of certain issues along the way, like Windows Vista, Windows 8 were not well received releases of the operating system. But there was just something about this operating system, and it would be nice if Microsoft reintroduce a theme that's just like this. And you look at even something like this, when I saw the control panel and all those beautiful, bright, colorful icons. And one of the things I loved watching was the Windows XP tour. It was so soothing. It was just beautiful, and it's just almost like it could bring a tear to your eye just listening to it.
Welcome to Windows XP from Microsoft, the new
So
version of Windows that
amazing.
brings your PC to life. Experience the best. Experience Windows XP. Best for business. Windows XP Professional shines as a business operating system. Get more work done faster, easier, anytime, anywhere. Safe and easy personal computing. Thanks to Windows XP, personal computing just got a whole lot easier and more fun.
Skip the intro.
To begin the tour, click any selection.
And this is one of the things Windows XP was all about, digital media.
Unlock the exciting world of digital media at home, at work. Built-in photo sharing and organization. With Windows XP, viewing photos and sharing them with friends,
this was
family,
really
and
what
colleagues couldn't be easier.
the PC had pretty much reached a point where it became mainstream because of this, you know, things like digital cameras and just connecting them to your computer, and they worked. It really made computing a different experience for many and raised the bar. Oh, just listen to that.
Playing music, video, and CDs. Like listening to music and watching videos? Windows XP includes Windows Media Player, so it's a cinch to tune in internet radio, download music or movies from the web, and watch streaming.
Let's check out some of the apps that came with Windows XP. Windows Media Player. This was the OG Media Player. This was version 8. I don't want to get flagged by YouTube, so we're not going to play that, but yeah. Version 8, this was just different, and it had, like, I think different skins that you could choose. Let's see where we can find different skins here. Yeah, this is cool. Now, of course, it's been a while since I've used Windows XP, so this is gonna look a little different for me, or it's just gonna, yeah, okay, this is where we choose the skins. I think one of the famous ones, I'm gonna see if I can find it here. This one was actually from Windows ME for Windows Media Player 7. Oh, here it is. Yeah, this was like cool to see this. But yeah, let's go back to the default player here. But yeah, Windows XP included the ability you could rip CDs and all that stuff. It was just really, really different. And of course, Windows XP included Windows Messenger. I don't think anyone remembers this, but yeah, it included a version of Messenger that was more for businesses. So if you used Windows XP in a company, you could do instant messaging with users on your network. And then you had MSN Messenger, which was the consumer version. And the games, there were just so many games that came with Windows XP. As you can see here, you had your Solitaire, Spider Solitaire, Internet Hearts, all the cool games that people would spend a lot of time playing. there wasn't really much that was different functionality wise. I'm just giving a quick tour of the interface here, and everything looks the same, but I can tell you if I connected this virtual machine to the internet right now and you looked in the processes here, it would just explode in different SVC host services being listed here. But just look at the performance, the memory usage. It's just crazy how little memory Windows was able to use. I'm running this on 128 megabytes of RAM, and it's just really performing really well. See, I would have like 45 megabytes of RAM remaining to run a program like Microsoft Word, you know, browse the internet in Internet Explorer. Look how clean and beautiful that desktop is. And we had Internet Explorer here. And I'm not gonna go through this. Yep, and Windows XP also included MSN Explorer, which was Microsoft's like competitor to AOL, and that would let you like access exclusive services, but I didn't really see anything that was different about it as far as browsing the internet. Yeah, Windows XP even included a movie maker software, so if you wanted to edit your videos out of the box, you could do that. Yeah, it was a pretty decent operating system, and I believe Microsoft could have just built on this. I think the one thing the operating system wasn't really great at is managing and organizing your files and finding your information. And Windows Vista resolved many of those missing functionalities like instant search. But apart from that, there wasn't really anything else that Windows was lacking. It was really a mature operating system at this point, and it was pretty much doing what most users wanted. And we go into computer, just take a look and see. Yeah, it used 1.3 gigabytes of disk space, which is just insane when you think about how much Windows 11 uses now. Probably a fresh install of Windows 11 is like maybe 40 gigabytes or more because of it's loading a lot of AI services into the OS2 and downloading models and all that stuff. But yeah, this was a different time, a different way of computing for many people. You still did a lot of your computing locally. Now, a lot of what you do on computers is just in the browser most of the time. Like every morning when I sign on to Windows 11, I'm simply just loading Chrome and loading YouTube. I'm not doing anything special, and there are even apps that are no longer around, like WordPad is gone. Microsoft has removed that from Windows 11, and I think they're pushing Notepad as the successor, or OneNote if you need to do note taking, basic word processing I should say. But this was so cool. Oh, I can't type. Yeah, I remember using this and wondering why it doesn't have all the features of Word that I was using on the computers at school, not knowing that there was this thing called Microsoft Office. This was a few years prior to Windows XP, but yeah, this was what you had. And if you were looking for files, you know, you had a little doggy here, and even help and support, a lot of that was local. That wasn't the internet. You could find information about how to use your computer and resolve basic problems. This was all built in. So this was a different time. This was a different way of computing. And you know, I want to delve into this a little bit more, but I don't want to make this first video where I'm talking super long. But yeah, this is the devil's own Windows XP that bypassed product activation, and you could just use it as long as you wanted until Microsoft detected it and made it not legal to use. But yeah, and you know, it also included some cool things to make. If you were using big screens, you could like enable, let's see, there's this thing called clear type. Let's see if I can enable that. Yeah, so this made text on screen a lot smoother and just nicer to look at. I don't know if you're gonna see it on camera here, but yeah, things just look a lot smoother. And yeah, Windows XP also came with some nice wallpapers too, and themes. So you know, you could choose a different desktop theme. There was one called Silver. Let's see if we can find that. And Olive. And one of the things I'm going to look at is Microsoft Plus in a future video. Yeah, that's the Silver theme. This is the Olive theme. Yeah, and of course I like the blue. It's just easier on the eyes. Yeah, and I just want to wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Hope you'll subscribe to my channel. I plan to do more videos like this. Coincidentally, this month is also, I believe, the 31st anniversary of Windows 95, so I might actually record a video about that. I already have that installed, so I probably won't go through the entire installation process for that. And it's pretty convoluted too, especially on a virtual machine, because the computer is so fast it doesn't make installing Windows 95 easy. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just gonna log off, and remember here, look at that, you could easily switch users. Just the experience was so different. But again, thank you for watching, and hope to have you here again in my next video. Take care.